Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive.
We forgot about this part.
Andy, what's up, man?
Look at this. These are nice. I forgot about the switching the banner over.
Yeah. There is so much going on in the world of sports right now between the NHL, NBA playoff, major championships in golf and tennis and you name it. Let's ignore
all that.
Let's ignore all that and let's take a step in the direction of what we really care about the most, which I think is still the NFL ?
Let's get back to the basics of what's been your highest ROI over the past 2 months.
The NFL draft.
Yes, the NFL
by a lot.
I was saying this to Alex last Friday on the deep dive or on Brown Bag was like, I'm kind of low-key crushing the NBA right now through no fault of my own again. Just, tailing our friend Dogma on certain series.
Sure.
And then, there's spots where you, Noops, him, Spoon, like 3 or 4 or 5 people all agree on something. And I'm like, well, I'm going to play that even more.
Yeah.
And
they're
that
hitting
sort of
at
stuff.
a very, very, very high rate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I might retire from the NBA betting now that I've talked about it repeatedly, because it's not sustainable at this clip. And the props from Darren and Hyslop and all the props have seen it well. So I've had a good run in the NBA, but it's still back to our roots, the NFL. And they're starting to see more chatter on the timeline, more chatter in some of the content as people are starting to dig into awards markets, into, there's player season-long prop markets up. There's obviously regular season win totals, divisions, conferences, Super Bowls, make the playoffs, everything. I mean, there's so many markets now, and we would be remiss to not start diving in. And right before the show, I kind of talked to Drew. I said, I wanted to dig into our processes for some of these.
Sure.
As you're seeing a lot of information getting thrown at you, especially when it just comes to let's just say regular season win totals or to win the division. I'm seeing a lot of info. There's a lot of good info. A lot of people are doing really good work diving in and creating, content or just data or data viz that's been great. And where do you usually start? Is it kind of a broad for you? Is it just like, I'm gathering all the data I can, and then I'm going to go look at the markets and determine, like, here's some markets that I think the number is a little off, and then I need to dive further into that specifically?
Yeah. So my process is a little more patient. I guess here's a thought. There's a lot of people who are scrambling to get like stuff out, content out, like as soon as the schedule is released. And I not care to criticize those people, because anyone who's doing anything that's NFL focused, like, lives through a very tough adjustment of like the attention vacuum of the Super Bowl's over. The draft process, you get a little bit of that same thing, but that's kind of a different set of people who are really kind of, focus center of attention when there's draft talk. And then, after the draft is over, it's like, well, what now? Well, I don't have that engagement high, and so, the schedule comes out and there is a tendency to like really heavily kind of lean into it because people are so thirsty for NFL talk and so thirsty for NFL attention on it, frankly. And like, I understand how all that works, and it's fine. Like that, again, like the NFL is king in this business, and particularly for those of us in the United States, it's just absolutely dominates the numbers of viewers and the number of viewers and the just the eyeballs, earballs, whatever. So
speaking of the US,
I get
quick sidebar. It looks like the US is closing in on their 28th consecutive Stanley Cup. Both the Canadian teams left have to play each other, Drew.
Not so fast, my friend.
And then
Calgary Flames look pretty dynamite.
I know, but it would be an away series versus the Avs.
Yeah,
that's a tough draw. So there can only be one Canadian team left in the Final Four,
The
and
flip side of that is they have at least one.
They do have,
NFL.
the silver lining, but
Yeah.
the worst part is like they do face a very tough Avs team. So
No,
cheering
but
for
yeah,
the
like
US here.
so I get it. There's like a scramble. There's a race to get NFL content up because people are like keen on it, and like it drives ratings, right? And I don't think that there is much utility for me to lock up bankroll at this time for win totals, because most of the win totals available to bet right now are 50-50 pricing, right? Or shaded off of 50-50 in one way. And number one, my philosophy is betting win totals. I'm trying to find alts. Frankly, like if you're gonna lock up bankroll that you could otherwise bet NFL games with, it better be on something that has high EV. And that for me has always been looking for alt win totals, not the standard ones. And if the standard ones get beat up and move a half a win or a win, so be it. Like I'm fine letting that go if the if the flip side of the coin is preserving that bankroll for to bet into other markets that are higher EV between now and then, right?
I was gonna say, even the winning years I've had on regular season win totals, and most years I've eked out like a small profit. It's like, I'll find the best price. I'll try not to bet heavy juiced ones. A lot of them, it's like, I found a plus 105. So I'll end up going like, hey, I went 4-3 and I made like 0.6 of a unit for tying up that much money for 11 months. I bet like these things in March and it's like, was this really worth it? And I still think there'll be a few that I take advantage of, but I do need to get deeper into the alts because it's like, man, when you're right, you're right.
Yeah. So I think I am just kind of a casual, interested observer with all of this stuff more than I am collecting data and making it actionable and using it actionably. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think where we land as a collective, you and I, is we're taking a lot of the data we're seeing, a lot of the data we've had already, our priors, a lot of our, some of the convictions we're starting to put together for the following season after the draft, after some of the free agency, the trades, the new coaching hires, some of the quotes, what we believe we'll see for scheme changes possibly. We're taking that, and it seems like the first place we're heading, it's like when you get into that, in college with you have to sign up for classes. The first page we're flipping to is the awards page.
Oh yeah. Well, those are bigger prices.
Yeah. And I think that it's just like the alts. Like if you're going to be really right about a team, like, do you want to play a team to beat their win total and be risk averse? And, it's like, oh, they beat their win total by 1. Like, what if you're actually have a great thesis and a great read on a team? They beat their win total by 6. You still just won a minus 110 bet. You don't get any bonus. It's not points betting. So you either have to bet an alt or like a team that you really, really, really do believe to overperform, who again falls into a situation where it's like, well, you know what? They're a middling team. Their win total was like 7.5, 8. They're supposed to be a 500 team. I think they can win their division. So that right there, you have a division price that's going to be, a lot more better payout,
right.
Or a coach of the year, a player on their team to win awards, a player on their team to, if you think a player on their team is maybe a big lever for getting them there, start looking at regular season, stats. What do you want to call just stats markets, over receiving yards, over passing yards? Like there's so many other ways to just like build a portfolio around a team. Like I don't think it's just like, hey, I like the Eagles. A lot of people like the Eagles. Like, go look for the biggest, go look for the biggest price. What is it? It's not division. It's not, Hurts over. It's probably like Sirianni coach of the year. Don't just take
or like Hurts MVP.
If you have all your money that you want to bet on the Eagles, I think the advice we're giving is not to just like, well, take it all and put it on Sirianni to win coach of the year. I think my general approach to teams I like this year is to take a bit of a portfolio look. Like I'm going to take, let's say it's $100. I'm going to take a chunk of that, like maybe $50 is on their win total.
Yeah.
And then you take the other 50, split it up between some alt win totals, some coach of the year, some division, some conference, perhaps even. You take that and you build an Eagles portfolio that kind of builds on itself. Like if I was right, you know what? I want a little bit of money. If I was extra right, I want a shitload. If I was super right, like it's a big green section of my spreadsheet where I just made 60x my stake.
I agree with all that. The other thing is if you're betting into a win total in the month of May, you better be goddamn sure that you are getting equity on that between now and the start of this season. Like if you lose equity on a win total bet you place now before they even kick off week 1, like you have made, not only just have you made a bad bet, you've made like a nuclear bad bet, right?
Full Job, like I've made a horrible decision.
You've made a huge mistake.
I've made a huge mistake.
Made a huge mistake. So that's kind of that's some of my general thoughts on this stuff. And I think this year, at least this is my general feeling, there is a somewhat de-incentivized space right now to place futures, particularly in the AFC. But in general, because of, I feel like one of the key takeaways from last season was that teams care less about regular season game by game. The two rule changes that matter the most in the last 5 years in terms of like how teams are approaching a season or any given game to me are we now have 17 of them.
Stay healthy.
And you only have one bye, right? And you could say, well, the fact that there's only one bye means you got to play extra. No, like it's that much less likely if you are kind of in that, very challenging division. Like if you're in the AFC North, if you're in the AFC West, like the things that have to go right to get you into that 1 seed are really, really, really hard. Like you're going to have to not only have injury luck, but every coin flip game is going to have to go your way. All your young developmental players are going to have to take a step forward. Like,
I don't know how we missed this too.
What's
like
that?
when they first did the changes, that's what
yeah.
we talked about. It's like, oh my God, the 1 seed, it's such
so much more now.
And to be fair, we weren't wrong. It still is a massive reward, and it changes your win probability for the conference for the Super Bowl by a heavy swing compared to being the 2 seed. But what we kind of lost in the shuffle, and then we found out right away, was like there's some smart teams that have realized, like, guess what? It's a very hard thing to get, and it's probably worth it, but we're not 100% sure the trade-off is worth going into the playoffs hurt.
Right. Yes.
Like, and I'm going to call it the NBA-ification of the NFL, because they've determined, like, what good is it being the top seed heading into the playoffs if our guys they have dead legs, they're nursing 6 or 7 small injuries, and everybody's banged up, the team is mentally fatigued, and we end up going out in the 3rd round to a team that we shouldn't have lost to any way, shape, or form. And it's probably the smart thing. And people want to talk about analytics, and they say analytics to most people just equates to 4th down conversions or when to go for it on 4th down. This is the true analytics that's going to come to the NFL when these teams determine, like, what's the best long-term moves for the team as it comes to increasing our win probability in the postseason when it actually matters.
In summary, welcome to the load management era of the NFL. And
it's not going to be like, oh, we're getting to the game, be like, oh man, they're sitting Rodgers today.
No,
it's not like full like NBA load management.
It's all been out there. Like think about like the Chiefs and the good plays.
Yep.
Right. Like that's happening. Like this is not us kind of just navel gazing and looking for something to talk about. Right? The good plays is a mentality that exists now. Like how does a team like the Bills last year lose to a team like the Jaguars? Like they came into that game with the shitty play, with the shitty game plan. They were like, look, we're going to win this game easily. Like we'll roll out we'll try some experimental stuff. Now if that bit them in the ass, maybe like some teams are a little less likely to just truly punt on games. But I definitely think that this is a kind of a concept and a mindset that exists among the contenders. And that's, I think, the important part.
Yeah, and I think the if we're gonna keep making the NBA analog, which is what's happening in my brain, like because you can't just sit players like to rest them.
No,
It's not the same. There's not
No.
82 games, and they're way more important because of that. So
yeah,
the NFL version of like resting players to get them rest
yeah,
is hey, we're not putting in the same game plan we normally would.
yeah,
Sometimes, like you said, it can backfire. We're going to always remember that one because it did, but you can put a game plan in where it's like, hey, guess what? This probably lowers our win percentage, our chances of winning this game by a little bit, but
yeah.
we're playing a shitty team, so we're okay with the trade-off of here's a game plan where our quarterback likely takes 60% fewer hits in this game overall. Like, we're going to put out a game plan that's worse overall as far as our scoring chances, our first down success rates, but we're fine with it because the trade-off is like, oh, Buddy Bear doesn't get hit nearly as much in this game plan. It's just the sequencing and the play calls are going to keep our quarterback healthy, and we're fine with that trade-off.
You want an specific example of that? Josh Allen running the football was a cheat code at the end of the season last year. It was an automatic first down whenever you needed it, right? You think that we're going to see Josh Allen rushing attempts over 4 per game until they play like at the Patriots in December? I certainly don't. If they do, that's like criminal malpractice. Honestly, like if they put him in harm's way and he gets hurt because they're exercising the cheat code when on games that don't mean anything, like, shame on them. And, I think Mahomes' mobility is a lot in the same way. And I think you saw the Chiefs kind of deploy that like in that way last year pretty effectively. And I think I would expect it again this year. And really, if you have a high leverage quarterback who, you need to be healthy in the month of January, you're going to deploy him strategically. And that would make the most sense. And similarly with some of your important skill position players, if they're nursing it in, like, if you have a guy who if Jamar Chase, let's use that as an example. Jamar Chase is dealing with a little bit of a hammy in week 3. You're going to give him 3 or 4 weeks off in a heartbeat. You do, like, using up or putting him in harm's way with where he is unavailable for you at the end of the year. Like that nukes you if you're the Bengals. Right. And I think you can say that for a lot of these guys. And so exercising caution with injury is going to be in vogue for these contenders and really like kind of increased premium on sort of the high leverage games.
I'm glad we went down the load management path because this has actually turned into probably a more interesting conversation they're just like more and more questions, thoughts, ideas are popping into my head because I think the better the NBA, I keep saying NBA now, the NHL viewer who is betting these games, who is, Rec Plus, who's tracking the markets, who's tracking a lot, who's really looking into the box scores and understands the load management era as you've deemed it. We're going to calling it that. That's it. Like Drew Dinsick has called it the load management area, and then I'm fine with it because it's right, it's correct. But there can be some, let's say the talking heads, let's say not the band that I like, but the media in general is going to take some of these games late in the season and say, because what gets clicks, we put a game plan together for a specific load management thing, or are the Bills in trouble?
Yeah, right.
So like a team is going to do this and lose or just eke by a way inferior team. And to people who are aware of what's going on or have watched the game, look at the box score, look at the differences in the game plan compared to the normal successful game plan a good team has run, and is able to discern like this team is fine, they did this on purpose. There's going to be some advantages to them hopefully in the markets, although the market in general is pretty smart, but you're going to be able to take something away from those games more than, maybe the general betting public is. Yeah. So I think it's going to be an advantage to some people game to game eventually if they're able to. I mean, again, similar to the NBA, like it's super easy for you guys who watch the whole season and manage this. Like, they straight up just punted this game. Yeah, like this team is better than this. Like they just needed to get people rested, healthy, and ready for more important things down the stretch. This team could have won this game if they wanted to. So I mean, it's something to really keep an eye on. And it's going to be interesting to really track which teams do this effectively late in the season. I just think in a general mindset, I want to classify those teams as the smarter teams.
Oh yeah, same.
Who have, I'm going to give them little bumps in the playoffs. I'm going to consider them probably a better scheming team when it comes to playoff preparedness and things like that.
Yeah. I guess the other major takeaway I had from last season's previews, where I was literally like, boy, did I overweight X in my mental model of this, was like, I was looking at teams like the Bucks, who were wildly deep and like just talent, like rich. And I was like, they can withstand injuries, no problem. Right. And then I was looking at teams like the Rams, and who are like super, stars and scrubs. And I was like, man, it's only going to take one. Right. Well, both of those got flipped on their head. The Rams stayed perfectly healthy. Everyone that mattered was available for basically every game. And the Bucks got a cluster injury at cornerback and and then wide receiver when they needed it. And, and the rest is history. Like,
and that's the unpredictable parts of the NFL would be, hey, guess what? This team had 10 bad injuries this year. All right. Like, that doesn't tell me anything, because if they were spread out across all the units, maybe not as big of a deal. But if it was like you lost your 4 starting cornerbacks, one after another over the course of 6 weeks, and then you lost a safety and a pretty good off-ball linebacker, guess what? Your coverage unit is now 32nd in the league over the past 3 weeks. Like, that's a big difference compared to, in obviously today's passing game, compared to injuries that get spread out and aren't super, affecting big units. And then the biggest thing that popped into my head when you brought up the Rams was, how are you supposed to predict, a team doing what they did as far as acquisitions during the season? But to be fair, like, if there was a team that was going to do something like that, it would have been the Rams.
The Rams. Yeah.
That front office that's their prerogative.
And if there was a team that wasn't, it was going to be the Bucks, because they were at the freaking cap and they were looking at the roster the same way we were, which is like, oh, we're perfectly complete. Like, we just need to get healthy.
So how do you change? Because what I just said is, to fix that, we're either predicting cluster injuries, which impossible.
Forget about it.
We're predicting, oh, you know what if we had said some shit like that? What if the Rams go and get like OBJ during the season?
Yeah. What if they trade for like Von Miller?
Both. Yeah. Nobody is going to say things like that or think of things like that preseason. Shit like that'll happen every year. So how do you protect yourself against getting caught?
I think if there's a single point of weakness argument against the team, you have to acknowledge that they know that too. Right.
It's probably fair for almost all the teams.
But no, if like, no, of course. I don't know. Most.
31-ish.
30. We'll go for 30.
30. I'm going to go, 30.
Vegas. The two teams we won't name them, but you probably know who they are. But like, I think if I think if there is literally a single point of weakness or an expectation of depth that you think guides you into a position, you should rethink that. I would just say that those are two things I'm going to rely on less in general. Like, I'm just not going to make plays based on that.
It makes me think too. Let's work off of that. A team has a strength or a weakness. We're going to assume they know that.
Yes.
And you kind of got to take that another step. Like, hey, guess what? The Rams, we could have like almost worked it out. I say it's hard to predict that they would have gone and got a wide receiver and a defensive player in the free agent market or trades. But I think maybe if we'd thought about it a little, we might have gotten there eventually.
Maybe.
Like we said, all right, because we say, all right, the Rams are super thin. And I say, Drew, you from the future is going to tell me, guess what? The Rams know this too.
Yeah.
And we say, all right, so let's pretend we're the GMs there.
Yeah.
And we know we're thin.
Yeah.
And the season starts good because it is a stars and scrubs roster, and the stars shine. It's a good team. It's competing. It's probably leading the NFC West.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to correct that? almost like a baseball team because they treat it like a baseball team as far as we're willing to make trades in season. Like, is there a team with a higher chance of making another in-season trade and getting rid of draft picks?
No,
because they don't give a shit than the Rams. We still would have never came up with the names, but we said like the Rams, maybe we shouldn't be so hard on them being thin.
Yeah.
Because they're willing to fix that and they're willing to leverage the future against it.
Yeah. Yeah. The other team,
maybe looking at all the teams in that light.
Let's do it that way. Yeah. Anyone from that kind of the Rams kind of brain trust, in other organizations, I think count. I would put the Browns in that conversation too. The Browns obviously very willing to, kind of do what it takes to shake up the roster.
And that's where I think we need to look at the team's weaknesses is we almost got to look at secondary weakness / strength. Like, we got to look at the front office or however they fix it. Like, you pick another team that has a perceived weakness. You assume their front office knows about it, and then you got to put themselves in the situation, the expectations, and be like, hey, guess what? This team has a weakness. Yeah, but also their win total's like 5.5. They know they're going to be bad. They're not going to look to fix it this year. It's a long-term weakness. I think this more applies to contenders, like teams that are contending. It's like, is it something they can do about it in the season, or is it legitimately a super big leak for them?
Yeah, no, I think so. A team like the Bears comes to mind where if the Bears ship talent and get back assets for next year's draft, that will not surprise me.
Yeah.
Right? Like they did it with Khalil Mack. That seems like the right thing to do because they are not competing this year. If they have other kind of decent players who are shining and are at the end of their contracts or are perceived assets for other teams, they seem likely to ship.
That's right? Perfect. Because what is the biggest knock on the Bears in the media right now? You didn't fix your line and you didn't get any weapons for your young quarterback, and you're probably pissing away a year of him needing those things to really take a step forward.
Yeah.
So if you do have think of guys that get traded, edge rushers, corner, a shutdown corner too, a skill position player on the offense. Like, if you have someone who's shining and someone needs him, you can get back. Well, I mean, even if it's a player for player, like if you can get,
that's a good point.
If you can get a good young depth, like, hey, this guy he's good. He could start other places, but they have a guard in front of him that's stopping that. If you can get some good depth on that offensive line or a young receiver to help, like that's the fix. And you do seem to be right about the Bears. Like, that front office seems to be willing to.
When we wake up week 4 and Robert Quinn is on the LA Rams, we'll remember this conversation. Like that's kind of how this goes, right? And I guess like the patterns are there to be kind of picked, and you feel stupid almost kind of expecting them, right? Like, if we had kind of said, who are the Patriots going to take in this year's draft in the first round? And we would have been like, well, no, they're going to trade. Like, people would have laughed and been like, yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, they trade every year, right? Well, yeah, they traded down again. Like like teams have a specific MO that I think we have to, we'll believe them.
There is, I mean, there's an aspect to that when we talk about the draft. We say there are teams who are like the Patriots trade down, the Raiders are unpredictable. The Steelers are going to tell you who they're going to pick like 6 months earlier. And as GMs can stick around and get some. That's why the new GMs are such a clusterfuck for us trying to figure out, like, man, what's the Atlanta GM going to do? What are we going to see from things in New York? Yeah, it did cause some problems for us in the top 10. Not that things went well in the top 10, but once you get to know some of these GMs and their MOs, it helps a lot for the draft. And I think, as we've been talking about for a little bit here too, it kind of helps from here's maybe the plan for the season and the long-term plan. Like the Bears is a better example of a long-term, where Robert Quinn's a great example. Like, man, I'm thinking of people that are more likely to be traded during the season, and he might be up there number one. Like, if he flashes, you need help on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, and you want assets in what is a very talent-rich draft next year.
That's really, getting a high pick for him as well.
Yeah, that would be pretty sick.
Robert Quinn for like a backup guard and a high pick.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. That's some general thought. So then what do we do with the schedule release then? I do think there is still some predictive value in understanding rest disparity, although you have to be a lot more nuanced than a lot of the people who are out there, just kind of broad brushing it. Good example in my mind is if you are if you are looking specifically at net rest over the balance of the season, and it's a big swing, but it happens to be because you're facing two teams off of bye and your bye got neutralized. That's 2 games where you got to face a team off of bye. That the number, you're going to adjust the expected win probability in those 2 games, but that's not really going to impact your overall your overall win total expectation for a given season. Certainly not going to affect your power number on a team as you're coming up with a fair, right? And the opposite I would say is like if you have 2 teams that have a -12 net rest advantage, and one of them has 2 -6s and the other has 4 -3s, right?
Yeah.
Well, the 4 -3s are worse because that's now 4 games on your schedule where you have the the kind of the dreaded opponent.
The whole
coming off
distribution of those
Thursday.
game shifts. Yeah.
Yeah, and personally, like we've seen the value of the bye diminish over the last handful of years for lots of reasons. And I think you can point squarely at the fact that the NFL is changed the rules about how much contact you can have with your team during the bye, and that some teams, like you go into your bye hot, everybody's playing well, everybody uses it as like a mini vacation. Like, hey, job well done in the first 5 weeks. Let's go blow off some steam. And then they come back the next week and it's like literally like, okay, wow, now we got to get back to work. And like they come out the following week flat. Like we've seen that dozens of times, right? I don't think there's a way to predict that, but we've seen it a lot. But then the opposite would be true, where if you are facing a team coming off of a Thursday night football game who gets 3 extra days to prepare for you, like that's a brutal spot, because the coaching staff is able to sit down and dial in and spend extra time like breaking down your tendencies and come up with a game plan that's specific to especially hurt you. And I think that rest advantage is still a little underpriced by market, where at least the buy correctly priced by market has diminished over the last handful of years. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, probably. And that's the biggest thing I think I've seen that's bugged me about people making broad statements about some of these teams and looking at their schedules and just counting games. Like,
Sure.
like, oh, this is after a bye. It's like, here's a team that is this team's peer or roughly around the same power ranking, but this team's off a bye. So I'm probably going to give them that one. Like it's not as much of an advantage as it was.
Yeah.
And also I think, I don't know, it just seems like it's the same as anything we do. People want to spin their own narratives, but boy, the coin flip games are the most important thing of schedule evaluation to me.
Of course.
And when you want to bet an over, there's those coin flip games. Like for some reason, when you want to bet an over, 60% of those are going your way when you start making the reasons why.
Yeah, right.
And the opposite happens when you want to bet an under. But like, oh man, I know this is a coin flip, but man, it's a sandwich spot, or oh, it's a bad spot for them. And I think that's where the alt lines are coming in for me. It's not so much me evaluating a team, but give me a blind resume of, don't show me who the team is. Don't show me who the opponents are.
Just tell me market fair price on every game.
I would love to take I'd like to take my power rankings and then take the prices for, give me all the prices once those all come out. And then I want to plug it in and find a way to give myself blind resumes so I can look at a team and be like, this team has 11 coin flip games. And I think there's, depending on how these schedules shake out, just without even looking at who the teams are and who the matchups are and the rest advantage and the travel, but like determining this team has such a broad distribution of results. Like maybe I don't even need to know the sticker on the side of the helmet or who plays quarterback. I know this team should be an alt spread or an alt regular season win total bet because of how I think all these games, if it just starts to snowball one way, if this team is, if this team is 3 points worse than what we thought they were, and they're favored by, a shitload in a bunch of games, if one of the favorites is like, instead of being a 10 in the market, they're a 7, they still have a bunch of games against bad teams where they're likely just to win by fewer points. But if a team with like 10 coin flips on the card is 2 or 3 points worse, also it's like, oh man, they went like 3-14 this year. Or 3 point better. This is a team they had an 8 for a win total, and they end up winning 12 games because they had all these coin flips. I'm looking for teams that have a bunch of coin flips. I'm going to evaluate that, and then I'm probably going to actually look at it and be like, do I think they have, the pieces in place, the scheme of things to become a team that's, what do you think is a realistic jump for a team? Because we've seen teams where it's like,
I think
the Bengals, there's outliers every year.
Yeah, this is a good exercise, and the blind resume part of it is fascinating as far as like a thought exercise. I think I think that there's probably a way to do this blindly and make money. Okay.
That's what I say. I want to make bets
here's of my
without
philosophy.
even knowing the teams. Like, I want to bet this team.
Yeah. Tell me if this makes sense to you. Team X has a win total over 8.5, right?
Yeah.
So they're expected to be good, right? They have, if you go and look at their schedule of expected spreads throughout the 17 games, and you decompose it to win probability in every game, and then add them all up, and it's 9, it's 10, whatever the number.
This
right?
is the next step for sure.
But most of those wins are coming from big spreads in the back half of the schedule, right? Yeah. Like it's weighted by, they're favored by a lot of games down the stretch, and that's getting you to the good outcome, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where I was at too. Like the difference between being
spreads are intact at the end of the season, it's asymmetrical. Like either that team is as good as everybody thinks, and those 7-point spreads exist at the end of the season, or something happens in the beginning of the season and all of those shrink, right?
Yep.
And if all of those shrink,
and it could be
then
anything.
there's no
it
way
could just be
you're getting to that number.
underperformance, injury,
injury,
schedule turning out to be a lot tougher than they thought.
Yeah, any of those things possible, right? So I think that's the way we look at it. We take the last half of the season, and if more than 50% of your wins are coming from the last half, or more than 50% of your losses are coming from the last half, then you're a blind bet over under on the basis of just those prices are not going to be those prices when we get there. Kind of like the, back in the day, looking at the kind of game of year lines and being like, well, a team in week 14 should not be 14-point dogs. Like, we get there and they're 3-point dogs. Like, how many times that happens? Way more. And like the worst case scenario,
they'd have to be worse than you think they are. And the other team would have to be better, really, at that point. And
the worst case scenario there is that, no, everything is exactly like we thought, and that's a 14-point spread, in which case you're coin flipping anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I think that there is merit there.
Yeah, and my thought too was I'm trying to find teams with all those coin flip games who are near the middle of the spreads of regular season win totals, somewhere between like 7 and 9 for win totals, because a team who has a win total of like 12, who's a very good team, if they are, let's say they're 15% worse than we thought they'd be, maybe like a 3-point power rank, 3 points in the market to the power ranking overall throughout the season.
Yeah.
Like, again, they're not going to lose that many more games because they were favored by so much in a lot of the games they were favored in. So that difference in win probability, like, what's the difference in win probability from being a 10-point favorite to, a 7.5? It's not the same as being a 3-point favorite to a pick 'em.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I like where you're at too with the late season stuff.
Okay.
But I'm still stuck on, if I can find coin flip teams in the middle who can go one way or the other, and suddenly, like, 8 of their games have shifted by like 15, 20% win probability because of XYZ, injury, overperformance, underperformance, additions, subtractions, a rookie standout. Like, and again, I kind of want to just bet this blind. Or at least paper bet this
Or at least
blind.
paper, like at least kind of let's do the exercise blindly and then come up with okay, team. We'll have to have someone else send us basically the the resumes and the numbers, and then
I think we've done this. We just haven't taken it this far. We get to these season previews in July, and we'll run into a team and we'll say, "Here's what the market thinks." Usually it's like we're pretty in line with that because that's fair. But then we get to the schedule and we say, like, we always run into this. Like, fuck, this team has a lot of coin flip games where it's like, here's 10 games where the spread is under 2.5 or 3.
Yeah.
And you start looking at that in the back of your head, but like some of those are the teams you can make a case. Like, man, if were a little bit better in all those games, they're favored by 2.5, they're favored by 4.5.
Yeah.
It's like that's a big difference for these teams. And suddenly those are the teams that end up going well over their alt totals.
Yeah, I think that makes tons of sense to me. And I guess
we shouldn't air this podcast. We're pre-recording this.
No, I think ultimately what we're kind of getting at is makes a ton of sense. And I think pointing to the asymmetrical outcomes is important.
So and to your point, you don't just mean someone who has a bunch of games late where they're big favorites. It can be the opposite. It can be a team. Yeah, for sure. Just
huge dogs
big,
late.
Big different.
For
just
sure.
Big differences in the win probability late. Where they're 6-point dogs in 4 out of their last 8 games.
Yeah, but like a team like the Jaguars is probably going to pop as an over just because they're going to be huge dogs in the last half of the season. But like if Trevor Lawrence makes a meaningful leap, like those games go from 6 points plus 6s to plus 3s pretty easy, right?
It'd be a market a market that should exist is regular season ATS win totals.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah.
They'd have to be quite fucking clear on we're using it's our closing win totals from our book at kickoff, and we'll display those and let you know. But that would be an interesting market to bet because that's how you find an overperforming team that doesn't have to win all their games.
Yeah, right. And I think if you just kind of go back and I'm going to pick a couple of examples from last year for when we kind of circle back on this, but I feel like if you like a team like the Chiefs last year, where they had a bunch of coin flips, but they were all concentrated early, and then the games where they were expected to be huge favorites were all kind of concentrated late. Like that's a red flag, right, for a win total, because like the coin flips, even if they all go coin flippy, like the team's going to be around a little below 500 come Halloween. Like they're not going to have the same market respect that they did preseason in terms of like their power rating, and we kind of seize on that in the moment week by week, or we try to, right? Like buying low on teams that we know to be good that are just had a string of tough games or bad luck, right? But like I think it definitely like there's an aspect to it where if there is an injury associated with it, or a player pops developmentally, or a coach is a lot better, or scheme is a lot better than we think it's going to be, or a high variance team like the Chargers, all of the fourth downs break their way, right? Like any of those things could potentially feed into huge overperformance for a low expectation, or a huge underperformance for a high.
Let's dig into that list that you just kind of spit, off the fly there. What do you think is the most likely way for a team to overperform? Is it players? I think it has to be more than one. It has to be like two or three. Like, let's just look at the Bengals. Like Jamar Chase turned out to be everything as advertised and more.
Yeah.
And Burrow
quarterback took a step forward.
Burrow took a step forward where a lot of people were worried he was still going to be battling an injury from the year before. The offensive line was a problem, but they had enough explosive plays where sacks were, kind of negated. Like it's a lot easier to put up with 2nd and 19 when you're having a lot of explosive plays. And then, just numerous players on the defense played better than probably expected across all 3 levels. Like, I don't think scheme can ever be ahead on the list of just having some players outpace their expectations or projections. Like, and that's really hard to predict.
I think the Bengals also pretty obviously benefited from the rest of their division underperforming due to injury and or age.
Yeah,
right?
Obviously the Ravens, we don't have to talk about that anymore.
Yeah, the quarterbacks,
they had a lot of injuries.
Yeah,
The Steelers barely
Baker
had a quarterback.
Baker Mayfield took a massive step backwards either because of injury or because he actually sucks. Lamar Jackson took a massive step backwards because of injury. And wasn't available.
The team was just injured everywhere.
The team was injured everywhere. And then the Steelers, because of age, just didn't have a quarterback. So, like, you won a lot more games in division than you were expected to when the season started.
So it is probably, and it's funny, this is where you end up still with the people who do the content, and they make a long list of why a team can be good. And it's, we dog on that a little, but it's probably fair to say that it doesn't have to be this perfect storm, but a team has to have like 5 or 6 upside avenues.
Yeah, it needs more than one. Right?
Like you need to have 2 or 3 players that are poised to play better than expected. Like to have an unequally weighted distribution of results. Like he often plays just like we think, but his tail to the good is a lot bigger, thicker, longer, whatever. Jeez, I'm just getting dirty. Than other quarterbacks, and then looking at their schedule and seeing a lot of teams with tails to their under as far as this is a bad injury risk team, this is a thin team, this is a team that probably more likely than not, Big Ben is too old to play well despite the skill talent at the wide receiver and the defense. Like, I think just adding knocks against other teams or adding check marks to teams. Kind of almost wanted, if somebody wanted to do this, you'd almost encourage them to like come up with 50 reasons. 50 is too many. 25 reasons why a team could overperform, and don't limit it to that team. Limit it to, pick their 3 divisional teams and determine like how likely is this team to underperform, and just start taking ticks and like
just do a straightforward accounting.
Just if you want to simplify it, do some counting and be like, can this quarterback take a meaningful step forward, or is this quarterback an injury risk? Like, is it a +1 or a -1 in that box? And start coming up with all that and see where you land on some of these teams. And I think maybe you'd end up surprised a little bit. Like, this team has a shitload of upside opportunities based on schedule. Their divisional opponents have a lot of knocks against them. Their quarterback is more likely to have a breakout season than a Darnold season. I think that's a good one to pick on. Like, I think if we'd have done this exercise with Carolina, they'd have had I'm not doing tick marks anymore. In my head, it's already evolved. It's either +1s or -1s or neutrals. Yeah. And I think the Carolina Panthers would have had a shitload of -1s. Just like, what are the likely outcomes for Darnold? How is that tailed? It's tailed to the -1. Like, McCaffrey stays healthy. That's a -1.
Tailed to the -1.
Like, the defense overperforms. Less likely than, yes, at best it's a neutral. The coaching is actually good. It's a -1.
Yeah.
If there's some teams I think you could make a lot of knocks on as you're looking for, I need a bunch of different reasons for this to end up in this is the opposite of blindly
I got
betting because I think
it's a little tough to do that without bias, but I agree with you that's
so much bias. No, 2 people will have, if they did this, there'd be a bunch of disagreements. But I think if you take this and blend it with your blind betting, said, hey, I found a team with, like I said, they have a bunch of coin flips. They're a high variance schedule. And if they're a little better than I think, they're going to win 6 more games than their season win total says. And then you go through this other exercise and you find more reasons than not that they can find that. Because that's the second part of the equation is this team has to be 2 or 3 points better in their power rankings than we thought they would be. So if I can find those 2 things that match up, they have a good opportunity to be 3-4 points better than their power ranking starts at, and they have the schedule that matches up with a team vastly flipping a bunch of win projections, like that's a home run for me, I guess.
I like it. So
After we led with don't bet regular season win totals in May.
well, no, what you're saying is
I'm
this.
betting
I'm gonna
Alps,
like
yes.
you're saying I'm gonna be a buyer on Team X, and
Yeah,
you're gonna
and
distribute
yeah,
it a
it
bunch of
doesn't have
different
to be
ways.
a
Yeah,
yeah, it
find
doesn't
different avenues to try to capitalize on that.
yeah, you're right. It doesn't have to be a regular. It doesn't have to be a season-long bet. This
Yeah,
can
I mean,
be.
yeah,
I'm just
and
a
it
buyer on this team early because
sure,
it's Scotty Scheffler. Like if you were the
yeah,
guy who believed in him and you're betting him when he was 40-1,
yeah,
you're a lot richer than the guys who are betting him lately.
yeah,
And
and
if you're ahead on a team, you're gonna get you're gonna be betting them as an underdog outright. 3 weeks before everybody else on TV is like, oh man, hey, this team is a surprise. We should bet on this team now. No, you should have bet on this team a month ago because I figured it out in the preseason.
yeah, right. I would also say that there's generally there's still a good kind of balancing act to be between like I think this team is going to be better than the market. Well, if I think this team is going to be a lot better than the market, then just kind of saving your powder for betting them game by game for the first handful of weeks is still smart.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
exactly like I said. You want to be the guy who's betting on them when you think their power number is wrong,
yeah,
and just crushing it game by game. And that's the thing too. If you want to bet more money on it, game by game markets in the NFL are gonna allow you to bet plenty of money.
truly. So last kind of a couple thoughts on schedule. I think we've covered everything kind of process wise
We
pretty
got
well to
weird
this
with
point.
this. I liked
Yeah.
it.
There were a couple of wrinkles in the schedule that were pretty wild. Uh, did you see that the Patriots for the like 100th year in a row have gotten their bye lined up with another team's bye?
We said that last year. I think you even said it would not
So
surprise me
many
if it
years in a
happened
row.
again next
So
year.
many. Okay, so now
Bill's asking for it.
at this point they're asking for it.
Yeah.
Okay, they're asking. No question in my mind. And actually, this year more teams than ever were bye squashed. Okay. We saw more teams get bye squashed than we've ever seen before. What is going on here? Why would Bill
I
be
think you
asking
already
for this?
said it.
Are
You've already
teams
said it
blind?
during this podcast.
Are teams blind doing this because Bill's doing it, or is there actually some signal here?
I think you already said it. Like
Okay.
the buy isn't important, and if you think the buy is not as important, and other teams are messing up the buy, and you can do it better than them, just line them up together. Just line them up and let them underperform that week while you're doing a couple things to make sure your team doesn't fall into that state of malaise.
Yeah.
And just deal with it then instead of coming off the bye that you think is less. So it's taking a step back. Let's say you as a coaching staff think you're better than the league average.
The league average, yeah.
At preparing your team to not fall into that state of whatever and whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
During the bye and prepping that team to come out of the bye, great.
Yep.
But at the same time, the changes in the league rules have taken your advantage by doing that away a little bit.
Smaller, right.
Made it smaller. You still think you're better than the average team at doing it. Why not just face the team that's screwing up the bye at the same time instead of taking it against a team that just played that week?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but
it does.
I can't. No. I think maybe that's where you're at, and you're probably right. Of the teams who are requesting it, maybe it's a 50-50 split of teams who think that way and know what they're doing, and there's probably like 2 or 3 teams who are like, Kraft and Bill are doing it. We're going to do it too.
We're going to do it too. Yeah. Okay. So some years you draw bad and you get the Colts and they beat you like last year. And some years you draw the Jets like this year. And presumably the likelihood of the Jets staying focused for that first week of the bye, less than 0. Not less than 0, but close to 0. Anyway,
saved by 0.
Yeah. So that was an interesting observation. Another observation. I feel like this happens every year, but boy, did it happen this year where the NFL kind of sits down and picks on one team to really kind of test them. And the one team is typically the Super Bowl loser. Like the NFL really likes to induce the Super Bowl hangover. And the first team I clicked on schedule-wise because I was curious was what did they do to the Bengals this year? Like, did they front load it so that they underachieve out of the gate, or did they backload it to really just thunderfuck this team? And holy hell, did they backload it? This is as difficult a finale as I've ever seen. And this isn't to say that this means that the Bengals can't repeat success this year and get back to the postseason. But if you consider some of the aspects that got them there, which were somewhat lucky, and you now look at what they're staring down the barrel of the gun here, it's tough for me to have any kind of enthusiasm for this team this season. Do you think sequencing matters for a team like this, or is being backloaded ultimately good? Because they got to play, they don't have to play any team twice, so they won't benefit by like an injury to a quarterback like Lamar Jackson or something like that, which the teams did have the benefit last year. But there are better ways to finish your season than Chiefs, Browns, Bucks, Pats, Bills, Ravens.
By not play twice, you mean not play twice in that stretch.
In that stretch, right?
I was gonna say, I bet they still play the Ravens twice.
They still play the Ravens twice, but the first time is week 5, second time is week 18. Yeah,
but
Browns in 8, Browns in 14 is close-ish.
But I think it's a disadvantage because there's a much bigger chance of everything funnels down. Like there's always teams. There's no opposite of an injury, you know?
Yeah, right.
There's no, I mean, a player overperforming.
A leap.
And there's always going to be leaps, but there's more injuries than leaps. And there's more room to go down than there is up, always.
Yep.
So good teams or teams that are perceived to be good always have more room to fail than to move up and become even better or just stay in that status quo.
Yep.
So I don't like backloaded difficult schedules for a good or perceived good team, because it's a lot better to make it to that second half of the season and have that easy landing when things are going wrong. You're grinding. You're trying to find out why you're not as good as last year because teams have had a chance to scheme in an off season for you, or, you're just not getting the same kind of production. Let's just pick on the Bengals because you seem to be fine doing that for 2 straight years. But Jamar Chase isn't as good as last year or something.
Sure.
I'd much rather be playing shitty teams later while we're trying to sort that out for the playoffs than, oh man, like we're having all these problems and the schedule is about to get tougher.
Yeah, right.
So it's fine. You know where I love a backloaded team? A backloaded schedule is, I'm going to call it a lottery team because I've been doing NBA analogs all the time. But like a team like that where they know, okay, we're fine. Like we're fine punting on the season. It's over. The dream is dead. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to tank when you're playing a really good team. Because you're not even really tanking. You just have to go out
let's just go out there and give them the goods. And
what if we just put out a really vanilla defense this week and rotated in some younger guys on the D line, and oh man, they're scoring a lot. This rats. This stinks, guys.
Yeah. Okay. So did you have any other broader, just kind of generalized observations about the schedule that made you enthusiastic or cool on any given team?
The biggest thing is to, I think, watch the end of the season closely. The load management thing is going to be more prevalent than it was even last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the smarter GMs, the smarter front offices, coaches, organizations know that 18 games is coming, and getting better at managing your team overall health mentally, like you talk about mental exhaustion, that's a thing at anyone's job.
Yep.
Like managing their physical and mental health through a longer season is going to be an important skill for any front office who wants to succeed in the postseason, as the season's just going to get longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're going to be able to pick up a few teams that weren't doing things like this last year that are, And those are the teams that I will give bumps up in a lot of things. Not just that, but it's like, I think this is a smarter team next year come the draft.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Final comment on the schedule, and then let's hit the music. The Chargers social media team absolutely fucking rocks.
Oh God.
Holy shit.
When I got to the Jags one,
incredible.
I was dying, and then you get to the Browns one, and they topped
Browns
it.
one is great.
Redacted.
The Seahawks one was great.
Yeah.
The
Awful House.
The Falcons one where the W gets knocked out. Unbelievable. 28-3 on the freaking thing. Like I mean, that was a work of art. And like I can't even imagine how long it took those guys to think all that through. But
there was a 28-3 tribute yesterday.
Electric. Was there?
In a Big Ten baseball game.
Oh wow.
A team was losing 13-2 and won 30-16. They went on a 28-3 run in baseball.
Shit.
Yeah, apparently the pitching is something to be desired in college baseball right now for some teams.
Interesting.
The Chargers knocked that out of the park. That was hilarious.
Unbelievably good. That was really something.
The Cardinals with Kyler like unfollowing on Instagram and stuff. Yeah. That was great.
It was electric.
More teams need to do that. That's like anything the NFL is trying to do is well behind just like teams having really good social media platforms like that. That's what gets engagement from fans.
Count me very, very, very in on the good-natured shit talk like that. And count me very, very, very out on the Pat Beverly shit talk tour. Like not interested in that. I didn't.
I can't have that all the time.
He got eliminated before these other guys.
I know,
he's out there just absolutely throwing.
He's not shit talking a team. He's shit talking one player, and like that coming out of the blue was great. Like because nobody saw that coming. Like why is he on this morning? Oh no, he called the guy Cone. You can't have guys who are eliminated on all the time just coming in and like shit talking the teams that are left. But like a one-off, like out of the blue like that, cracked me up. I guess, and to be fair, you're biased because you had Suns exposure, and you love that team, and I'm biased because Pat Bev is like he's a god in the city now because people just love his shit talk. And seriously, like in the playoff game I was at,
let's just check on Pat Bev when he's 37.
Well, Pat Bev will never be a shadow of Chris Paul. But that's not what matters here. It matters because it was hilarious. But that's the beauty of like that playoff game I went to. They didn't interview Cat. They didn't interview Anthony Edwards. When players walk off the court, they grab Pat Bev like that. He's a cult of personality. He's fun. And also fuck Chris Paul. I don't like Chris Paul. And he's a nice guy. He's probably one of the nicer guys in the league. So I was fine with it 8 ways from Sunday.
Okay,
well, you're probably right. Like
I like the good.
It's not a good look.
I like the good-natured. Make this more fun than the truly mean-spirited, which is apparently all that their Pat Bev is capable of. So that's just my 2 cents.
He's a cone.
I think make it more fun. I don't need the true kind of
now you sound Midwestern. Spite. Like I get uncomfortable when people are really mean to each other because I'm too nice.
I guess
except Boston. Fuck Boston. Just as a city. Although everyone was super nice to me when I was there.
Yeah.
I watched too much Winning Time.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hit the music and then call it a pod. Sound good?
Yes, this is fun. A lot of things we talked about I did not think we'd be talking about before the podcast happens.
Yeah.
That's why, kids, if you do a podcast, do not build a script or an outline.
All right, take it easy, man.
See ya.